Welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I started an eco conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, Oxford Clay, I don't just make pottery, I also make books and courses for other potters who want to be more environmentally friendly in their pottery making. And that's what this podcast is all about. And I can't wait to get started. Let's go. In this episode, we're going to be talking about making pottery glazes. And when you're working with any powders in pottery, powdered rocks, powdered clays, ashes, you must always use an FFP3 face mask to protect your lungs. Hello, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Tomlinson, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about an age-old pottery debate about whether to wash ash if you're using it in a pottery glaze. Do you wash ash or not? And this might seem like really weird, like washing ash, but basically, if you look at lots of books on ash glazing, so I was researching a lot about ash glazing because I love ash glazing and I've been practicing ash glazing like loads in my own pottery, and I've been reading loads of books about ash glazing, and a lot of the books talk about washing ash before you add it to, before you're using it in the glaze recipe. And the process basically that they're talking about is, say, like, for example, you make lots of ash. So you have a big bonfire, you've got lots of hardwood ash that you've got. Maybe it's, from you're burning some, you got some ash you're from a wood burning stove, or, you've got it from a bonfire, or, you're making your own ash with like leaves or, prunings or some wood, some hardwood that you've got. Basically, what you're doing is you're taking that dry ash and then you're putting it in like a bucket of water, and you're kind of rinsing it. Ash is caustic, so you shouldn't like touch it with your skin. But essentially, what you're doing is you're adding water to that ash. Um, you're going to then wait for the ash to settle. You're pouring the water away. You're maybe rinsing it a second time if you want to, but then you're going to have to dry that ash. And in one of the books I read, it was talking about how you can sort of put it in like bisqueware bowls or something to dry it out. Um, like easier to kind of, I don't know how long a wet ash takes to dry, but I guess it would need to be in an area where there's like kind of no wind, so you probably need to dry it inside. And yeah, so they suggested putting it in like bisqueware pots, sort of lay it all out, dry it, and then you can use this ash in a recipe. So, obviously you would need to sieve that ash at some point. So I guess you could sieve it in the beginning before you rinse it, or you could sieve it like after you've dried it, after you've rinsed it and dried it. But that's essentially the process of washing ash. Okay, so why would somebody do this? This is a process which is obviously going to take a really long time, washing this ash, drying it out. So the reason that potters do this is the reason I've seen, is that is that so in one book I read, it was basically saying that they felt that it would gave a more kind of uniform look to the glaze. So I guess it washed out things that might, create maybe like imperfections in the glaze, or different coloration in the glaze or something. And really interestingly as well, another reason for washing ash is that ash can contain salts that can like damage the clay, when that it can damage the wall of your pot really. So there's a really good book on sort of ash glazing. Well, the potter who's written this book uses a lot of ashes in their work, and it's The New Ceramics Natural Glazes Collecting and Making by Miranda Forrest. And in that book, Miranda Forrest basically talks about the sort of differentiates between marine plants, that the ash from them that does contain a lot of salt. So Miranda Forrest says that washing these is a great idea because it can, the salts can damage your pottery, the clay. And then land, sort of more like land plants. that don't need washing. So that's really interesting. So Miranda Forrest, in that book, talks about not washing um, ash that's from land plants, but does wash ash from marine plants. So that's another reason. It could have, like, salts in that can sort of disrupt the pot, like can damage the clay basically. And this was really interesting. When I read this, I was like, oh, because I did loads and loads of ash glazing tests for the book Pottery Glazing with Plant Ash, and I tested so many different plants. And two of the plants I tested were actually, I guess, like salty. Because they were like marine, well, from a marine area. So the first one of them is in the book, and this is driftwood. So it was basically just driftwood collected from the beach. So it did have salt in it, and I didn't wash this ash, and left a really interesting surface on the clay. It's kind of like gone kind of bubbly, and I can see that actually, it doesn't make a smooth glaze. Perhaps washing this ash would have been like a really good idea, but I didn't wash that. And yeah, the surface is just kind of really rough. It's kind of like a green, rough surface. The glaze is kind of fizzed up a bit like a kind of like a sherbet or something like that. And it's not made a great glaze. And then the next one, but this was actually from a seaweed like bladderwrack, which I collected from like the same beach. Um, yeah, so this glaze was really sort of really didn't work. It basically really bubbled up, and it, yeah, it kind of like it literally like fizzed up. It looks like it fizzed up in the kiln, and it's all like bubbly and not smooth, and bits are kind of flaking off, and there's sharp edges, and so yeah, again, I think this would have benefited from like being washed. So perhaps it was the salt in those two glazes that meant that it had such a kind of interesting effect. Let's call it interesting, but really not really a glaze that I would like be able to. You really wouldn't really be able to use that glaze because it's kind of hostile with its sharp edges and bits kind of breaking off and stuff. So yeah, so that made me think, oh, that's a really interesting differentiation. Yes, perhaps marine um, ash washing it is a great idea, and then like land plants, perhaps due to the lower levels of salt, perhaps that's something you don't need to do. I'm just interrupting this episode to tell you about a totally free guide I've made just for you on how to make a stoneware pottery glaze. So, if you've never made a glaze before, or if you make loads of glazes and you just want a recipe, this guide is for you. It tells you everything you need to know, and it's available via the link in the show notes. Let's get on with the episode. So I actually don't wash any of the ash I use in any of my pottery. And the reason for this is, well, first of all, it just seemed like a really long process. And I thought, I don't think I can do that really long process, also testing loads and loads of different ashes. I just thought, just the logistics of like washing them all, letting them all dry, keeping track of which one was which and stuff. I thought, and sieving them and stuff. I just thought, I just don't think I can do this. So I didn't. And like I said, most of the ashes that I used, they came out really, really well. And I actually, when I was researching ash glazing and, for that book and also leaf ash glazing, I found this really interesting. It was a really interesting study on ash glazing, and it was basically saying that you can actually end up washing out some of the things that make the glaze really beautiful. So some of the fluxes and some of the kind of useful aspects of the glaze of ash in a glaze can actually be washed out if you wash it. But obviously, other potters are not finding this because they're regularly washing their ash, and it's fine, and they prefer it that way and stuff. So I because I really wanted to kind of emphasize the differences in like the coloration and the kind of maybe the trace metals and the different ways each glaze looked. I thought that washing it would probably be a bad idea because I didn't want to wash those away. I wanted to keep it sort of as as unique as each glaze ash as each plant ash was. I wanted to kind of try and keep them special in their own way and not wash anything out to make them kind of like more uniform and stuff. So, yeah, so to summarize, you can wash ash if you want to. It's probably a good idea for anything which is going to contain like high levels of salt, but you don't have to. And yeah, another thing which is quite interesting is that you would also need to have a completely dry ash to be able to make recipes, in my opinion. Like, my understanding of glazed recipes is that the ingredients generally are like dry ingredients, and that's how you weigh them out properly. You would, if you have added water in those ingredients, it's going to be more difficult for you to know like how much to add. So you would have to make sure that ash was really, really super dry before you then, made a glaze with it. So, yeah. Like I said, it's completely down to like personal preference, personal potter preference. And it's probably, maybe a case of just experimenting with like different ashes, and oh, this one goes all like bubbly and weird. Okay, maybe it would be a good idea, like this seaweed one. Maybe it's a good idea to actually wash this one. Oh, the driftwood one. Oh, maybe it makes a really nice, nice green glaze if we wash it, and it's not some kind of really rough kind of bubbly one. So yeah, personal preference and probably just experimentation, but you don't have to wash ash, but you can if you want to. So yeah, it's been really fun like talking to you about ashes. Always love talking about ash glazing. Another opportunity for me to talk to you about ash glazing. And yeah, if you wanted recipes, the couple of books on the Oxoclay website have lots and lots of ash. Well, it's basically the same recipe, but just switching out the ash every time. It's a very simple recipe. Um, and yeah, you can see the effects of like different plant ashes, and you can get some really, really beautiful glazes just by switching the ash each time. Yeah, so wishing you very happy potting, and I will see you on the next episode of the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'll see you really soon. And thanks so much for joining me today. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for joining me on that episode. And if you want to find out more about eco-friendly pottery, head over to the Oxford Clay website, which is www.oxfordclay.co.uk. Can't wait to see you there.